Hello and welcome to Free Together, Free Apart, Hacking Family Success. I'm Eric Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Center for Family Studies, which is a wonderful organization that I feel extremely lucky to be a part of. And lucky to have found out about Bowen theory back in 1993 when I ran into Dr. Ann Bunting, who'd studied with Murray Bowen down at Georgetown in DC, and the family center he started down there, which is now called the Bowen Center. Bowen theory is precious. It's not for everybody. It has a unique power to solve some very meaningful problems and help people solve meaningful problems. Can't do everything, but it's good. It's very good for overcoming high stakes relationship challenges in families, in congregations, in businesses. I think I've been lately calling it Bowen leadership theory because it provides a very basic and fundamental toolkit for anybody who wants to make a relationship system better. And that person is, that's how I think of leaders. So many of you on this call already know a lot about it. And I'm really looking forward to having a rich conversation today about the journey of learning Bowen theory and applying it and using it to make life better. Vermont Center for Family Studies, I love our simple mission statement, strengthening families of all kinds, multi-generational families. I believe they are the foundational social institution every single place in the world. And if they're stronger, all the other institutions are going to be better for it. Schools, governments, businesses. And today I am delighted to have with me two guests who are two of our wonderful Vermont Center for Family Studies faculty members, supervising faculty in our training program, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Sarah Davis and Cami Kelton are two of our, we have 6 faculty, and they're all amazing, in my opinion, my humble opinion. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Cami. I think you guys are muted.
Is that better?
I hear you.
There we go.
What are you guys doing?
Hanging in there, doing well, thank you.
Got any daffodils popping up, Cami?
Yeah, they're not blooming yet, but they're this tall.
Here in
They're
Vermont,
coming.
daffodils don't pop until mid-April.
Yeah,
We welcome them when they arrive.
yeah, we do. Yeah.
So Cami and Sarah have taken a deep dive onto the journey of learning and applying Bowen theory. And I'm just so looking forward, guys. What a great topic is that journey and what's it about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to add anything, either one of you, to my intro there that
I would just concur that it really is sort of for me, it's been kind of this fabulous journey, and I'm still very young in my journey. I wish I had found it back in 1993. I think that things, may have looked, maybe they wouldn't look a whole lot different than they do now, but I think I would have benefited at that point in my life, knowing the theory a little bit more at that point, but I'm certainly benefiting now.
Yeah, I think about, I have a lot of daughters, and as they head into the journey of, at some point starting families, who knows, maybe they'll be mature enough that they won't need external bodies of knowledge. It'll just be in them, deep in them, with the knowledge of how to build a really sustainable, satisfying, and sparky, dynamic family. But certainly, many people run into a little roadblock. I know I did at some point. I was just thinking about someone very important to me in my life who they were just like getting wins every decade, 10, 20, age 20, age 30, wins. About age 40, a big problem appeared in their life, and it was in right at home.
Mm,
And I think it was a huge puzzle for this person dear to me. That was 1970 for this person.
mm,
And boy, do I wish somebody had been around who could have informed him about Bowen theory.
mhm,
How about you, Sarah? So Cammie's a long time, senior psychotherapist, seen it all. And Sarah Davis is a nurse practitioner who's been working for many years helping people. You want to add anything, Sarah, to the intro of this conversation?
Well, thank you. I'm thinking about you sort of framing it up in terms of leadership.
Hmm.
And, I think about having been in the training program for 4 years and now as a faculty member. And we certainly do have a lot of therapists, primarily therapists in the group, right? Over the years, at least in the years that I've been involved. And yet, and I think I was sharing this with you and Cammie earlier, is that it's striking to me how the presentations that are done at the end of the program each year are almost always about people's some personal effort that they're making, and that they have that has come up for them during the training program, and that they've selected that they want to sort of take a look at and learn more about, as opposed to clinical or case studies. Those happen certainly, and those have been great over the years, but it's striking to me. And so I do, and as much as I appreciate having the framework as I do my work with my patients and do therapy, personally, it has been, I have learned so much, and it has been so useful. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, and I thank you for highlighting that, because I think it is a unique feature of the Bowen family systems theory training tradition, that it's more than welcome that people learn it by learning it in their own family work. And I think that's inspiring to certain people. It's I don't know. Some people really like that.
Well, and to the extent that you have this live experiment going on all the time, and you can wrestle with a concept, or you can wrestle with a situation in your life, and then begin to think about the concepts and how they apply, how you might apply them, what makes sense and what doesn't, what's still confusing about it. So
I don't want to ask either of you to share any details you don't want to, and we can do this with protecting, family members. But what do you think of as the kinds of puzzles that trainees in this process tend to dig into?
I'm happy to share a little bit of my own experience. And I think it's probably pretty common as a trainee, that when my first year in the program, I heard the message that the best way to learn the theory is to really apply it to one's own life. And I took that to heart. And I was, it was not at the beginning of this effort, but I was in the midst of kind of still working on how to launch my kids. They were not in the house. They were, college and post-college, but, in their 20s, still needing parents, me still figuring out, how to not be too involved, but involved enough, those sorts of things. That was a puzzle for me at that time, continuing that effort. And I think that's where I really started applying the theory. and it was so helpful to continuing in that effort. And you were, you know, part of that. Your coaching was part of that, so you're sort of familiar with the story. And, you know, and 3 years later, what I would say is the benefits of that effort continue to play out in my relationships with my kids.
Can you give a little flavor of that?
Well,
That's it.
yeah, a little flavor of the benefit. I feel like I think that I have a lot less anxiety about my kids, even when they are, you know, making big decisions for themselves, even when their lives might be in transition from one thing to another. I think that our contact and connection is pretty, it's pretty lovely, you know, and it's interesting to sort of think about, you know, the contact is, they often initiate it, right? They often reach out, you know, it's sort of this even, sort of more of an even field around who's reaching out to connect. And
Herb said years ago, I love this, that he said, there's something attractive about differentiation of self.
yeah.
And it comes to mind that a differentiated mom in the launching phase is relatively attractive to the kids.
Yeah. Yeah. It really was about
There's an anxious chasing dad.
What's that?
An anxious chasing dad might stimulate a different impulse in the kids.
Yeah.
So that's one example. I think, you know, for some people, it's overcoming a challenging relationship, whether with an adult sibling or one's adult parents. Mary Bowen made this statement that if you could get to the point where you just see your parents as people, you know, and for many it takes into their 30s or 40s to pull that off and relate to them in a person-to-person manner. If you could pull that off, he said, you got it made.
Yeah.
He thought it was that foundational for other relationship skills.
Yeah.
So it could be that kind of thing, or you know, how do I have more of a person-to-person relationship with my spouse? Sarah, you want to get in on this? What would you say on this topic?
Yeah, for myself, the first year I was like, I just went directly to the triangle between my mother and my sister and I just, it was like I had no choice. It just, as I began to dive into the theory.
Did you come in knowing you wanted to work on that?
No, I did not. No.
Okay.
No, and so interesting to me, and just over the years watching that triangle be activated in different ways, and learning about trying to achieve more objectivity about it, and being able to watch it as opposed to getting caught in the storm of it at times, and then other times where it's quiet or where, you know, things are calm. And so just watching one's own learning curve, that's been fascinating for me. And then of course in the training program, it's really fun to watch others grow and develop more of that systems view, develop a little more objectivity.
Maybe we can talk a little bit about that journey, and what are some of the predictable steps in it. And then I'm also wondering if you could speak to the question of, and I can too to some degree, is, you know, how do those kinds of learnings affect how you operate in the world as a professional?
Well, I remember one time, Eric, you and I were talking. I was talking about a situation, a clinical situation, and I was realizing, as I thought back on a difficult interaction or a challenging, worrisome situation for a patient, that I felt I felt anchored in some way. I think I bet we've all experienced being in a situation either with an individual or a group or a couple of people, whether it be a client, a patient, a family member, whatever, where you begin to
Coworker.
a coworker, you get caught up. That anxiety is so infectious, and you can feel yourself, and you become sort of ungrounded. You uh, and I can remember realizing that in that meeting with that person, I began to feel that way, but then as I brought the framework, it helped anchor me. Um, and so I think this is it's this process of perhaps becoming a little more anchored in one's thinking in challenging situations. That's to me, that's the learning curve.
And maybe anchored emotionally, which is a really great term if you think about the metaphor of less shoved around, less pushed around by the wind. If you're anchored at night, you know where your boat's going to be in the morning. And I think I'll just throw in that, Sarah, you just described it so well. And what's happened for me is I think it's significantly expanded my capacity to be helpful. So first off, to be anchored myself, that's probably the foundation of being useful. If you're talking to anybody in any situation, whether it's, executives who aren't getting along or people in a congregation who are fighting and some of them don't like the minister or whatever, or, in a clinical practice, they're looking for anchoring in themselves. If the person they're talking to doesn't feel anchored as they're hearing it, that's probably not a great place to start.
Yeah.
And then from there to have some real wisdom about, I think Bowen theory is so fundamental. That's, it's so fundamental that the ideas are so fundamental and the practices are so fundamental that they're applicable pretty much anywhere. And that's what I mean by the wisdom that's in it.
I was really struck by, for myself, how applying the theory to some personal efforts and family efforts, how it was almost like there was this organic kind of experience of those efforts translating into my work. And I think it was really just this process of getting better at and learning to observe myself and others, like Sarah said, a little bit more objectively, and making sense of what I was seeing through a Bowen lens. The lens helped me to it was a guide to sort of help my understanding of what I was observing. I think about, as a clinician, how sometimes we can get quite caught up in the content of what somebody's telling us, this very intriguing, highly detailed story with a lot of juicy details, right? And we can get sort of seduced by those juicy details and not really have a sense of what's actually fundamentally happening here. If we can step outside that content, what's the process? That's sort of for me been, it's an ongoing challenge to kind of step out of content and try to see what's happening in the process and in the system, trying to think systemically. But I think applying it and living it in my own life has been the best way of learning that. Yeah.
I was just telling somebody I was talking to at lunch that years ago I worked in the community mental health centers, and when I first got my job there, I had a master's in counseling psychology, and I got this job, and I was kind of honest, I was a little bit like, oh my God, this job is so hard, and this isn't really what I signed up for, and am I really going anywhere? And I was dealing with really, really difficult, dramatic stuff. And I now look back on it and think, I am so lucky that I had that job, because I had to learn. And early on, I got lucky. I got, this Bowen theory was my sidekick through the whole journey. And I
Mhm.
really did get to the point where I had a lot of calm in the storms, and I could see the other people around me who were working in the same storms,
Yeah,
sometimes having a lot less of that and
yeah,
suffering. And ended up, a large part of my job became helping other staff to find calm in the storms that they were in.
yeah. I think for me, entering the training program when I did, what, 3 years ago, 2017 is when I started, and now helping to teach. I think it really diverted burnout for me in terms of that point in my career. I
Yeah.
feel like I have this sort of renewed energy for my work. I enjoy it more, and I feel like it's less hard on me. And I really think it has to do with what I've learned about what my role is and what it's not, in my effort with people.
Hmm.
And that's been a huge gift.
I was just thinking we should maybe give a little detail, and then you did it, Cami, this, what's my role
Mm-hmm,
and what is it not?
mm-hmm,
So I want to invite either you or Sarah to comment on that piece of the journey, that discernment,
hmm,
and how it relates to anchoring.
I think about my role. It's not about instructing another person how to change. It's more about helping them define the problem more objectively, and then that may and often opens up new opportunities or new options for managing whatever the challenge is.
I
I
think sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
I can still believe me, I still do plenty of instructing on how someone should change. I'm working on that one. But if you're going to ask me to say what my role, what I believe my role to be, and what I'm working on, it's that. And I think I read somewhere, I think it was Kerr, said something about, as soon as we get anxious about fixing someone else's problem, we stop learning about them, learning about their family, and they probably stop learning too. So I can tell you what I don't think is my role, and again, what I work on is getting anxious about fixing, because then I think the learning and the objectivity go out the window.
That's a beautiful quote from Dr. Kerr.
mm,
Paraphrase. In about 5 or 6 minutes, we're going to let people go into breakouts and chat a little about the ideas you've been hearing. And I'm going to go visiting around into the breakout rooms, and you could ask questions. And afterwards, make it a wider conversation here. But I asked some of our trainees to join, and said that at a moment I might invite some comments from them. And I'm wondering, Joe Berger, we want to get into on this for a sec? What are you thinking about as you listen to what we're talking about here, from the perspective as a trainee? And you're in clinical practice?
Yeah, I'm a therapist in private practice too.
Yeah, what are you thinking about as you hear us discuss this, or what would you want to add?
I really like this topic of like theory as an anchor. And I've been noticing after like 6 months of kind of immersing myself in this material that like more and more in my personal life, when I find myself in an emotionally like tense situation with a family member, like with my girlfriend, I like will find myself kind of like anchoring myself in a way, like seeing the situation from like kind of bird's eye view, and like thinking of it almost as like an example that someone would bring up during like the training program. And it's really been helpful to kind of like think of some of the principles that we've talked about. And I noticed the same thing happening like in my practice, that I'll be listening, I'll be like really into whatever the problem the client is talking about. And then I keep like a a folder, and I have the genogram on like on one side of the folder. And when I'll just catch myself and I'll flip it over just so the genogram is there. And even if I'm not actually looking like at the genogram, it kind of like re-anchors me back into theory, which has been helpful.
I wonder if part of that is, just this fundamental idea that there's a kind of depersonalizing power in viewing human interactions as a system. And, breaks people out of cause and effect, victim, villain thinking, and you can sort of becomes a fascinating systemic puzzle. And that's really interesting to hear you talk about having a kind of witnessing quality in both those situations. Joe, could you take a shot at describing the atmosphere in the training program?
It's a lot more like getting asked questions about what you think you should do, or like the events that led up to sort of the question that you have for yourself, and a lot less like instruction or sort of explaining things. But it's really been a good environment of like a mix of teaching the principles like in the beginning, and then consult where we kind of talk through personal situations or professional situations.
Yeah, just for anybody who's watching this now or later on who's curious about how we do it, there's training programs around the country. We have our own model, it's similar and different, and it's a 3-hour meeting times 7 months. And we usually have the first hour and a half, one of our faculty presents concepts, which usually are illustrated with stories. And then the second half is a smaller group supervision experience where people present puzzles and think about it together. And then there's a shared reading component, and finally a final presentation. So each trainee has a capstone project that they're encouraged and supported in doing some putting together some of their best thinking, or their sort of almost teaching, having a chance to teach. You learn a lot when you have to teach something. So thanks, Joe. Mike Decker, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was thinking about the question you asked Joanna about what the training class was like. And I was thinking it's like a really safe show and tell atmosphere for kindergartners, but everybody's showing and telling their sort of family issues or work issues or family dynamics that they're struggling with. And just sort of being able to share that and get positive feedback is actually pretty helpful. So
So Mike, you're a vice president in a large, important nonprofit in America who doesn't live in Vermont. You're doing this remotely in our training program. And you want to talk a little bit about that? Interesting. I mean, have you put more time in the program so far on your own family, or back to work, or both?
yeah, I think I was secured, hook, line, and sinker at a time when I was going through divorce and a new job and new family and a whole bunch of things going on. And, triangles hit me hard, and it was very critical that I understand that. But I think what first hit me was definition of self. I was so worried about what everybody else was thinking, what everybody else was, what I wanted them to do and what I thought they should be doing, both in a new job and at home, that when I saw the Bowen material and definition of self, it was all about, well, what do I want and what do I think is right, and how should I act? So I think it was you and everybody has said this, that Bowen becomes important probably at a time when you need it most, and that's when everybody gets hooked, and that definitely was true for me. I think as I sort of grew up at home and then in the role that I have, there were so many triangles, and my boss was leaving and there was a transfer of authority and just a whole lot of emotion and fighting for territory, that the concept of, what is right, staying calm, not overreacting, engendering trust in others, I think was really critical. And I've used it quite extensively at work, and my team has gone through much of the training, and I find myself now working on cutoff and estrangement in, I guess, not that it's the last thing, but it was the thing that was probably most impactful, but I wasn't ready to address that at the time. And I
Yeah.
guess I've worked out some muscles and gained a little courage along the way, and that's where I'm at now.
And that summarizes, is that like a 10-year journey, would you say, or a little
Yeah,
less?
I was actually looking back and cleaning out my office here, and I think we got together back in around 2009. So yeah, almost 12, 13 years. Yeah.
There's no question that for most people, the journey of learning Bowen theory isn't a 1-year journey. I think you can get a lot from a year actually, but most people, it's a very challenging. I think of it sometimes as sort of like I don't know, like spiritual training or something. It takes a while to calm down and see the system
Yeah.
you're in. So Sarah and Cami, I want to invite you back in here maybe before we break out and have a breakout, 10-minute breakout. Uh, what do you think? What'd you think hearing Joe and Mike talk?
It's nice to hear their experience, and I I think it echoes a similar experience I had as a trainee, in that I felt like the learning within the group, as well as the theory in and of itself, I think both functioned for me as a source of encouragement, right? That they both felt like this form of support in how to learn to manage myself differently, how to observe myself and others with a little more clarity and objectivity, less judgment, less intensity.
And
And it's
maybe a
just,
little more force too at times.
yes, learning to kind of take more of my own position. And I would, that, that story. And I think the couple of years of learning the theory, building up to that experience of a relationship challenge with a sister after our mother died, it was pivotal to my being able to take some of the actions I did. Yeah, I think of it as like when I'm in a situation where I'm trying to figure out what's going on and what my part is and how I want to operate, I really do try to think about how can theory help me with this?
Mm.
What am I seeing? How do I make sense of it?
I think this is a perfect time to break out. And so many of you familiar with this, how we do this here, but I'm just going to share my screen for a second. Well, let me just mention this, that I had a very special interview with Ernie Pomerleau a few weeks ago on my other show, which is Leader Site. This is for my business, Thompson Leadership Development, which is a different interview show that I do. And it was just really struck people. He talked about the lessons he's gained from some very significant deaths in his family that he's encountered, including the death of his only daughter this fall. And we're just going to keep going with this. This doesn't have the date on it, I don't think. I'll tell you the date after the break, but he's learned a lot about this powerful quality of trusting life from these experiences, and I'm going to interview him about that in just a few weeks here on this other show that I call Leader Site. And here's some questions you might consider as you go into your breakout. I'll just let you read those. Simple questions. So we find, I just find people benefit from the opportunity to think out loud a little. And here's some guidelines for how the breakouts operate. It's going to be 10 minutes, and then you'll come back in here and have the chance to interact with us some more. I think if somebody just jumps in and starts saying, here's what I'm thinking about, or, that thing that Joe said made me think about this, that's a good way to start. If somebody does that, then the conversation just flows. So I'm going to set it just take me a minute here to set up the breakouts. Breakout function in Zoom.
James and Tammy, it was nice talking to you.
All right, welcome back. Let's make it a conversation. Does somebody who hasn't spoken like to jump in here? And what's inspiring you? What's puzzling you? What's intriguing to you? What's boring you? What's annoying you? Go ahead. Somebody started to speak.
Oh, this is Mark. I'm puzzled why my video is not showing. I wanted it to. Sometimes it doesn't.
Mark Abrams from Phoenix, Arizona. What's on your mind, sir?
I'm still in South Burlington, quite frustrated, hoping to leave soon. But it's always great to catch all of these offerings. It's my mind was blown immediately with the interview that you mentioned with Ernie.
Yeah.
Not to be missed. But
by the way, that one's next Wednesday.
Yeah.
On the 14th. And if you don't get the link, everybody on this call should get the link to that part 2, lessons from loss, the power of trust. But yeah, the first one was pretty well. We don't have to linger on that one right now. What else?
Right.
What else are you thinking about?
Well, just hearing in the breakout that I think things are interestingly moving that a little bit more towards the transpersonal realm in terms of theory. Hearing from one of the participants mentioning not just meditation but prayer, and that's the first time I've heard that P word mentioned in this format here. And it's just very interesting to see this evolution. And I felt in discussions about it even a year ago, Eric, that there's a certain, between us here together, we're friends, a certain inevitability based in science and empiricism that the correspondence and harmony and value of meditational states vis-a-vis theory will emerge and get validated over time. And I think less time perhaps than we thought.
My colleague Mark Abrams has done a lot of work on the link between these things he's discussing and this beautiful vision in Bowen theory of neutrality and a non-anxious presence within a connected system, and perhaps the mysterious and underappreciated power of a person who's in a system who's coming from that kind of place. Anybody else got a comment or a question for us?
I just say thank you for all of these sessions that have occurred this year during the pandemic. I was in Cammie's group and expressed my appreciation too. It's been a real chance to have some good conversation and also reinforce lots of ideas, hear different viewpoints. So it's really served a great purpose, Eric. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Kim, are you a clergyman?
No,
Oh, therapist?
I'm a recently retired educator who served on a number of committees and whatnot at my church, at a Unitarian church, and we use the healthy congregations model to keep us straight, and it's good. It's great.
Yeah. And are you up in Michigan?
Yeah, Traverse City.
Somebody else? Beginners welcome here. Beginner questions welcome.
Since it's quiet, I'll mention another thing that I'm always struck by is Bowen always stressed in the films and talks how important having a strong grasp of theory is, even if you never talk about it, essentially. But for the therapist or the human, he says so much comes out of how one thinks versus technique. I mean, so just that inner state, learning as much as possible, and I think also a little goes a very long way with the theory, and but that idea of the inner state, not to be discounted in interactions.
Carla Tennyson, you got anything you want to put in here about your experience in the training program? Or?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was just going to jump in, and now you've called on me. This whole hour is for me kind of like a celebration of the theory. I'm so grateful that actually I got into a pickle. I was a school counselor at work, and I knew enough to know it was about me. And I, in the 90s, began to seek out some coaching in Bowen theory and to learn more. And so just the sharing that's been done in this last hour, how much the theory has changed my life, that I'm a different person. I think I'd be in a very different place if it wasn't for the theory. And I'm very grateful for finding coaches, different programs. And so to the Vermont training program, it's, even though I have over 20 years of experience, it's been a deeper dive for me. I think I'm asking better questions. I do coaching. I'm asking better questions. And so that's because I've been asked really good questions. And so it is changing. I'm a better coach, not only, so I feel like I'm functioning better in places I'm at, but it's great. It's great. This is a great theory, isn't it? I like the lifelong journey, and I'm appreciative of the training program. I must say, even though it's online, it's very effective and interactive, and very meaningful. I actually I couldn't have taken it if it wasn't online, because I live in Virginia. So
Yeah, I think like our whole world is it's like I was saying to somebody, it's like every organization has become national or international this year.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a little bit disorienting. And we're really gonna have to have this conversation about, well, what do we do with our in-person training program? Do we try to do a hybrid or what? But I'm quite sure that we will we're not going to turn away people who want to do it online. That
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
doesn't make any sense. We won't be doing that. And I think even for people in Vermont, here regionally for us, there's a tremendous convenience. So I just wanted to show you as a picture of back when we were in person. This is kind of what our group looked like a few years ago. And here's a little picture of some of the nuts and bolts of it. I'm just going to let people read that for a sec here. And these pieces of information are also there on our website. Those of you maybe have seen this, but we did a conference on polarization leadership a few months ago. That's available for purchase. I think it was really special. And also this one, Walter Smith, who's amazing on going beyond a disease model of social impact. He talked a lot about his change management journey as an executive in a system of care in Pittsburgh. And that's another one that's available for purchase. Well, Cammie and Sarah, how bad did we mess it up, would you say?
I think we did okay.
Messed it up pretty okay?
We messed it up pretty okay. Again.
Got any last thoughts, Davis?
I just was in our breakout, Mike Decker said, he said, we're not related, but are you sure we're not from the same family? Because there is this sense of,
Yeah.
that's what one of the things that I appreciate about the learning about the theory is that it brings us together in some ways. It helps us remember how natural so much of this is that goes on in our families. There's a connection that happens with others who are also learning the theory that has been meaningful for me.
It's
I thought it was just
I think it's such a puzzle in Bowen theory. We really explore the ways people get stuck together and the way that our reactivity and our stuck togetherness ends up being a significant dimension of the problem that we're dealing with. And so there's a kind of critical analysis of the togetherness force, which isn't really about intimacy. It's more about people being a prisoner of their reactivity to each other. And so that's on the one hand, but on the other hand, there's this kind of unifying impulse in Bowen theory of coming to see oneself as a multi-generational person, as a part of a multi-generational system, and the value of person-to-person connection. So these two hands kind of left and right, refining a kind of profound balance of these two things is the way I see the journey of differentiation of self. All right. Thanks for being with us. Cammie, Sarah, thanks so much for doing this with me.
You bet, Eric. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Comments, Carla, Mike, thank you. And maybe see you in the Ernie meeting. I'd love to have any of you come, and we'll keep going here. I don't know what we're going to do next, but we'll do something soon.